Realization when you get into the business that unless you stay at a small property size, you are not going to be the majority owner of your own deal. That is a big expectation that you come into the business. You're just like, well, wait a minute. If I only own 15% of the deal, how am I going to make any money? And you're like, haha, welcome to real estate syndication. Oh, and by the way, you eat last. People are like, oh no, deals that cash flow from day one, everybody's making money. And you're like, no, that's all going to your investors. They get paid first because they put up the money. So I would say 90% of the compensation for the general partners comes at the point of sale. So if you need someone to bring money, you give them equity in the deal. If you need capital raising, you give equity in the deal. As a result, you come away owning 10% of your own deal. And by the way, you're in charge, right? You're the captain of the ship. So you have to get through that phase. And I jokingly say in this business, you have to get your first 300 or 400 doors just so that the next 300 to 400 you can make money on.
You're listening to the Guerrilla State Investing Podcast. We're not here to bruise your bananas with guru sales pitches, overrated fluff, or any other kind of monkey business. We simply provide the ground-pounding truth about what it takes to be successful in real estate.
All right, and welcome back to another episode of Guerrilla State Investing Podcast. I'm your host, Brandon Magierowski, and before I introduce our guest for today, just want to go through our sponsor. This podcast is sponsored by From Middle Class to Millionaire. If you're looking to escape the middle class and network with like-minded people, jump on Facebook, join the free group. It's called From Middle Class to Millionaire. Okay, today's guest, all the way from the Sin City, Las Vegas, Nevada, is Branton Blount. Branton, welcome to the program, man.
What's up? How you doing, man?
I'm doing great. Thanks for coming on. Before I ask you this opening question that I know you've been thinking about, I just want to talk about the fee for the podcast. If you are listening to this podcast, this is a free podcast with free information of experts inside of real estate. If the fee is simple, if we make you think, we make you laugh, even if we make you mad, share the podcast, share this episode with a friend or colleague, share the information. That's all we're asking you to do as a listener of this podcast. All right, Branton, question number one, leading it off, man, what are you doing to escape the middle class?
Yeah, I think putting things in play for additional streams of income. And when you started off like I do, and I know you have with W-2 and other jobs and family and friends, you only got so many hours in the day. So I think there's a close assessment of time versus your time investment in developing those additional streams of income. So where I started was kind of around 2017-ish. Really hit a kind of a breaking point living up in Seattle. My background is in federal law enforcement and criminal investigations and 22 years in the military. And, by all counts, had succeeded professionally. And I reached a point where there had always been a stepping stone. And there had always been that next step that I was striving for professionally. And then I kind of got there. And I was only about halfway through my federal career by a retirement time frame, 20 years. So I was thinking to myself, boy, I had this just paradigm kind of shift where, is this it? Do I punch the clock? Just keep doing the same thing now? I'm there. I made it. Everything I've been working for 10, 15 years. And that immediately just became so depressing to me. And I think I learned something about myself in that moment, which was it was more about a little bit of the struggle and the creative path to find my way to places and to get there professionally, personally. And then there was the financial aspect. This is it. I'm only going to get medial salary bumps from here on out. I've kind of reached the ceiling within the structure, the federal government and the military. So I think I wanted to move the needle for quality of life for myself and family. At the time I was married, we were living in Seattle. We did not have kids yet. So I was thinking carefully about, how do I break into that next level? What does that look like? And I really didn't have an answer, because it was, no matter what, it was going to be outside of my professional lane. So that's where I really started. I think I literally Googled how to flip a house. I'm not kidding you. I was lying in bed one night. I was staring up into the ceiling in the dark. My wife was asleep next to me. And I said, we need another $30,000 or $40,000 a year to really kind of change things, to pay off school loans and to things like that. And that early midlife crisis, it wasn't a crisis. It was just really not knowing what the path forward was anymore. Not because anything bad had happened, but just because I'd reached kind of a T intersection in my career, and I could keep doing the same thing over and over and punch it until the pension hit and then leave. But that's not really my personality. So we did a single family, I came across Bigger Pockets like many do. I wish I had, I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and I'm pretty annoyed that I had never even heard about that book until my mid to late 30s. I'd probably be in a lot different place had I had read that in my 20s. And that really set us off on the path. Getting with like-minded people, flipped and bird a couple of single family homes. But because I was already in my late 30s at the time, I saw that as there was frustration surrounding residential lending, which we could talk about or not. That's, some people love it. I don't. Yeah. And I also I didn't see the ability to scale quick enough given where I wanted to be. And I didn't have 15, 20 years to kind of wander along down the path. So that's where I switched to multifamily. Okay. And we did our first deal with our own money and then off to the races.
That's awesome, man. Okay. I'm going to dial it back because you're hitting the nail on the head with a lot of people that listen to this podcast and even inside of our group, right? We've got two guys that are military that are going to retire by the time they're probably 40 years old. And you've got another 25 years of living and enjoying life and vacations. And that pension is probably just not going to be enough. Because if you think about it, when you're working, you're making money. When you're not working, you're spending money. Every time you leave the house, it's $200, it feels like, right? And that's why they talk about they talk about teachers being the worst with finances as a job, because they get 2.5 months off. And every time they leave the house, they got to swipe the card or pay for something. So you talk about, you had this realization that the law enforcement job is phenomenal. Obviously, the benefits are great. The retirement's great, but that's one income stream. And I'm on the same page with you as I need another income stream, because what happens if that law enforcement job goes away, right? Something happens, you do something wrong, you get fired, whatever it may be. You're on one vertical to make an income. Yep. So that's where you came in with the realization that I need another income stream, and real estate was your path, like it is for a lot of people like myself and our partners as well. So that's phenomenal. So talk about, you're in your late 30s, you make this realization, you wish you would have done it back in your 20s, but you can't go back.
Right.
Talk about that first deal. Like, they say the first deal is the hardest to do.
Yes.
How did the first deal go? How'd you get it? Where was it?
I would say, so the two first deals, there was the single family home that really got us going. That's where we implemented everything that we had learned to date, right? It was execution time, and you can learn as much as you can from a pre-operational perspective. We put everything in place. This is everything we know. We've built the plan, and a lot of people get stuck there. I think they call it, paralysis by analysis or things like that. One thing I do have is 20 at the time, 20 years in the military. I was not afraid to pull the trigger. I recognized personally, okay, I know as much as I'm going to know until I now execute and learn through that process. Yeah. And so we went to meetups. We learned how to find wholesalers, and we used hard money, a regional hard money lender up in the Northwest. And we just we started using all those pieces we had heard about on podcasts and books and things like that. Where did we go wrong on that? We used rules of thumb for underwriting. The renovation always is 25% more, not just because of mistakes, but if your starting point is just, we were just under budget. Yep. And undercapitalized. And so we broke even on it. All in all, it was fine. And then during that process, what started off as a flip, the margins got tighter. And then it also made sense during that process. I was learning more about taxation, learning more about active earned income versus, capital gains, passive earned income. So we held it for a year, and then a year and a day we sold it, and it hit that longer term capital gains. And so that was a great experience. During that process was where I made the mental shift to multifamily. Teamed up with a partner of mine who's in the business, same line of work as I was. And we bought a 16 unit down in Texas, North Texas, and did that with our own money, not in cash. But we got hard money loan. Mm-hmm. This was a 16 unit. It needed to be completely repositioned. We used rules of thumb again. We hadn't learned our lesson yet. Undershot the CapEx, but we didn't verify rent rolls and T12s. Well, keep in mind, this was a mom, when you're dealing with properties of that size, you're generally dealing with kind of mom and pop local owners, private owners. So there's a very good chance, even if they're running a property well, this was not, they don't probably have great books and things like that. They commingle their money. And so if you have this big giant professional due diligence checklist, you're going to scare them off real quick. Right. So you have to take it with a grain of salt. But we didn't do core things like verify the rental income. And that was a big mistake because the property was on paper 88% occupied. And it turns out there was, 8 people in that property that weren't even on the leases. They were just living there. They were just other people. Some of them were paying rent, which was fantastic, but they were not on a lease, didn't know who they were. And short of door-to-door interviews with tenants, you really have to, that was a learning experience day one, which is a rent roll is just a static document printed that day. And same with a lease. A lease says what you should be paying and the security deposit that should be held. It has no bearing on whether or not that rent is actually being collected on a continual basis. So that was a lesson learned there. And then CapEx, we did some things backwards. We were thinking, spend the money on the interiors. That's where your leasable space is. And we ignored the exterior initially. And turns out hard to rent beautiful interiors when the exterior has no curb appeal and you can't attract people to come.
Right. People are driving by going, that thing's a dump.
It was one of those things where our process seemed totally logical at the time. And then someone tells you that. I think it was like a Reed Gooson's podcast I heard. He goes, you always reposition the outside first, get the buzz going in the neighborhood. And I was like, oh, it makes perfect sense. So, 6 months in and struggling. But again, despite the gray hair and being undercapitalized and I think we budgeted $46,000 for CapEx. It was like 160. So when you're doing personal credit cards and, your credit score is dropping, you very, very quickly, you start to lose the political capital with your spouse, with everything. But we pounded it out. We got there. And month 9, we went to a local credit union and got the appraisal. Appraisal came in double the value of what our basis was. And we were able to do a cash out refinance and recovered 100% of the money that we had in the deal and put it on a 15-year local bank mortgage, and just sold it this past year, full cycle. So, we bought it for $270,250, put 160 into it, did a refinance and sold it for $700 3 years later. So
that's awesome.
It was but what that really taught us was we self-managed from out of state. We set up the programs, the platforms, we managed the CapEx teams, the construction. And what we learned through that was all the nuts and bolts of the business. Mm-hmm. And then that we felt like we had more credibility when we went to raise capital and use other people's money for our next deals. Yeah,
that's phenomenal, man. I love how you talk about the mistakes you made early on too, because, there's a lot of podcasts and guests out there that just talk about everything being roses. And, you need to get into real estate because it's, you just buy something, you rent it out and it appreciates in value, then you sell it and you're rich. Right. And it doesn't work like that. Right. I went through it for my first couple deals too. I read the books, I listened to the podcasts, and I was like, man, this sounds pretty straightforward. Right. But what the books don't teach you is problem solving on the fly. Right. Like you said, you got to get in the weeds. You got to be in the business. You got to do the property management. You got to do the flips. You got to do the CapEx budget. You got to do some of the renovations. You got to hire local contractors. All of that is experience that you need to grow inside of real estate. So making mistakes early is part of this. So if you're listening and you want to be a new real estate investor, it's not as easy as the books are making it out to be. Right. But that should not deter you from doing it, because the mistakes you make on your first deal, you're going to learn from the next deal. The mistakes you make on your second deal, you're going to learn everything for the next deal. And by the time you're in your third or fourth deal, you know exactly what not to do. Right. That's super important. All right. So you sell the 16 unit, then what?
Yeah, I think that's where we really started to partnerships. I think looking back and in some of the coaching we do with some folks, we talk about the clarity of vision. You know, you need to get into the business to understand why you're getting into the business. Your why, defined in many different ways. But I think Simon Sinek does a good job in his book. Well, he's got several books, but Infinite Game is excellent. So I think you have that. And then you have your foundational knowledge, learning the language of the business, learning your way around the business, the lending, the capital raising, how it's all structured, property management, all that kind of stuff. And then I think that's where a lot of programs stop, whether it's a paid program or whether it's a podcast or a book. I think that's where 95% of most programs stop, because that's the easy part, right? It's easy to listen to a book and to create a checklist. I think the connective tissue between bone and muscle is the third magical element, which is partnerships. And that's what we learned. We fell into it out of sheer necessity. You know, we spent 2 years with our 16 unit, but really the latter year of that 2 years, really spinning our wheels, desperately trying to solve for all the pieces of the business necessary to go to find a deal, to take down a deal on our own. And we didn't know any different. And you just spin your wheels. There's no way to do that in a team of one or two. I mean, you can, but it's, as you've learned with it's tough.
Especially when you're working too.
You've got a full-time job at 40, 50 hours a week. And I'm still in the military reserve. So 1 week in a month, I'm flying somewhere. And then now I have 2 kids under 5. And it's just, there's not a lot of hours left in the day. Yeah. So from a time perspective, and then also just the ability to actually qualify for loans, the net worth, the liquidity, the capital raising capability. And it was overwhelming. And we spent 2 years spinning our wheels trying to solve for all those pieces. Out of necessity in the beginning, we started partners. Someone brought us a deal, someone we met. And we said, okay, no problem. Let's work on it together. And from there, we went into a 24 unit. That was our first syndicated deal. It was more of a balance sheet builder, not a ton of upside, but it was just to get those assets under management and doors under management, build our track record, get through our first raise. And then through that process is where we realized we need to be very more intentional and deliberate about partnering up with people to solve for the various pieces of the multifamily puzzle. Right. And if that means finding the deal, sourcing the deal, underwriting the deal. And that's where a lot of people stop. Okay, I have it underwritten, but then who's got the net worth and the liquidity and the capital raising and the earnest money deposits and soft costs, to be scoping sewer lines and having contractors come out. That costs money, whether you buy the property or not. Yeah. And it can be thousands of dollars. And who's going to have the $20,000 to do the good faith deposit with the lender up front, even if you don't buy the property. And so you don't, first of all, the books and podcasts don't talk about that, right? Because that doesn't sell more books and podcasts. Right. Presenting all the hurdles, like you said, they're easily solved for, but you still have to realize that they're there. And that was the realization we came to. So then we started solving for that very deliberately and seeking out partners that weren't doing the same thing we were doing, same realm, but they could bring something we needed and that we could provide something in return. Hey, we have a deal, we have it underwritten. Do you have liquidity to be able to help us qualify for loans or to raise capital, or a property manager in this area that you've worked with?
So where are you finding the partners?
Yeah. And that's the hard part. We backed into it just by struggling in the business, reaching out to people, and then kind of COVID kicked off a couple of years ago, and that made getting out there and being in person with people a lot harder. Mm-hmm. But we went to a couple events, and I think that is, there's good events. There's not so much bad events. Anytime you can get out in front of people, but I think the size and the nature of the event is important. Yeah. It's human nature to really only connect with 6 or 8 or 10 people at any given time to have effective relationships. And so I think you have to think about that when you're looking for that. So, but I think the right events, you hit it off with people. That's how I met you and Ramsey at an event. And we were kind of in the same place in our business, a little bit here, a little bit there. And you see a natural partnership. It starts with personality connection, I think. Same vision on life, some of the same struggles. But if I go and try to just grab someone that's got 5,000 doors, I don't have a lot of value I can bring to them especially if you're getting started. Yeah. And they are not in a place in their business where they necessarily need to turn around and put the brakes on to help me out. Yeah. So I think finding those partners that are around the same area you are in their business, in their life cycle of their business, is key because they need you. There's something that they could use from you, and you need them. And it's good to have people that are slightly ahead of you because that's where you learn. They've encountered new problems already. So once we started partnering up, man, that was the big, I didn't realize it until later looking back. But all of a sudden it went from 16 units for 2 years and struggling to find the next step to a 24 unit, a 47 unit the following year in 12 months. And then 312 units, a 272 unit that we're part of, and another 40 unit and an 80 unit. And it just took off. Yeah. And that was directly tied to partnering up with people specifically for deals. It doesn't mean I don't mean going and grabbing you guys and saying, okay, let's start an LLC together. No, it's, we have a deal. You have a business. Let's come together for this particular deal as the common ground.
No, that's fantastic. And I'm going to get into the partnerships and how everyone works together to take down these large deals. Because when I was started out in real estate, I would drive by these 300 unit apartments and be like, what asshole has that much money to buy that thing?
Right.
Like, good for him. Like, you think just one guy's walking up and getting a loan and buying it. And then you realize, man, it's like 3 or 4 different teams, different LLCs coming together, using their strengths. Where am I weak? I'm going to bring this team in. I need capital raising. I need earnest money deposit. I need CapEx money. So you bring everyone together to buy it. But finding these people, I encourage, any listener out there, go to your local meetup first. You're going to see, when you start getting into this and you start following people on social media, you're going to see the big conferences, the ones in Dallas and Denver and all the best ever conference and this and that. And you're going to go there and it's going to be overwhelming. There's going to be 200 people there. It's speed dating, but you're going to find out there's about 15, 20 pockets of people that already know each other. And you got to work your way into the conversation, and it's good networking, good experience, but start with your local meetups first. I love smaller meetups, local meetups, learn how to talk to people, find someone in your hometown that's doing the same thing you are, and go to the conference together. Right. But Branton, I want to talk about your event that you put on in Vegas, right? We met, for the listeners out there, we met at a fund symposium. So we were there to learn how to create a fund and basically to raise capital for real estate. Ramsey, my other partner, met Branton. We were in the room. It was about 20 people in the room. We had about 2.5 days to get to know you, to go have drinks, to talk about things. If that was a 300 person conference, it would have been like, hey, Branton, nice to meet you. Maybe we'll grab a drink tonight. We'll see how things go. But we got to talking. We got to build a relationship. Fast forward, you're on the podcast. Most likely this year, not next year, we'll probably do a deal together. Right. That's what's the benefit of the smaller conferences. So talk about your event you did in Vegas. Yeah. And I know you're doing another one later this year. So I just want to hear about what your mindset is of putting on an event like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I tried to do exactly that. I tried to extract, we are not, between time and money, haven't jumped all around, and we're not serial event attenders. I love being, I'm not intimidated by people. As you can tell, I love to talk. I love networking. That's my strength in the business for sure. But I wanted to take away the great parts of the events that I'd been to and try to leave behind the fat, the things that I didn't find very useful. I'm not saying that the information is not very useful, but in general, you go to a larger event, one of the gurus is throwing on, like you said, in Dallas or Denver, any of those things. And there's 100, 200 people there, 300 people. It's almost like a pep rally. Is it fun? Yes. There's music playing and people jumping around on stage. And it's like a launch for a new iPhone, right? But the panelists, no matter how qualified they are, they all get up on stage, they start talking, and everybody in the room opens their laptops, gets on their phones, and semi-tunes out until the next break when they're actually talking to people and connecting with people. And so while there is good information there, I didn't find that to be the most useful, valuable use of time. So we kept ours small. We kept it at 20 people or less. And we didn't go into a big conference room that was meant for 300 people with 20 people, because that doesn't feel very cozy. We got a C-suite type meeting room that's meant for 25 or 30 people down on the Strip. We did it. I used to set up a lot of logistics for a lot of travel on the job. So planning events is not the hard part. It's really just having the right people in the room, and then putting the key elements in place that facilitate those connections.
Right.
So we did a meet and greet. We kept it very informal the first evening. And then we had a couple presenters. We wanted this to be more like 70-20 on content versus, or networking versus content. We didn't want people to zone out. We wanted an agenda and some good topics and some subject matter experts to speak, but we wanted it to really be just a vehicle for discussion so that people could get to know each other. And that's what we did. We had 18 people in the room, people that are doing different things. Some were brand new. Some have 300, 400, 500, 600 doors under management, but everybody found it hugely valuable. And we kept it fun. We didn't go to a show where you don't talk to people. We went to Topgolf, and it was like 110 degrees outside, but everybody had a blast, and we shuttled together. We ate dinner together in a private room. And the final day we had a roundtable discussion, which was agenda free. We went person by person and talked about, based off your conversations you've had over the past 2.5 days, what do you feel you can bring to someone else's operation? Mm-hmm. And what can they offer you? What do you need in your business? What's the biggest hurdle that's holding you back from taking down your first multifamily or the next size multifamily deal?
Yeah.
And people loved it. I mean, I am in a deal right now with somebody that I met for the first time at that event, and it was 40 days ago.
Yeah.
So it's great. And then we have a private Facebook group for attendees of that event, and we're hosting another one this coming October. And I'm really excited, keeping it small, keeping it intimate, and really learning about those people, their struggles, what their goals are, and everybody comes away knowing 3 or 4 or 5 people that they can now call, or a dozen people, for whatever they may need.
Yeah.
Because you've got, and so it was really, really high payoff.
What a difference between going to a 150 person conference and you got your business cards in your hand, and it's like a quick speed date. You walk by and you basically hand a person a business card. And I've come home from conferences with 20 business cards, and guess where they end up?
Right.
They're right on my desk, and it's like
for 6 months, and then you throw them away.
Yeah. It's like, who was that guy again? Like, what does he do? I only talked to him for 5 minutes. Like, what am I doing with this card here? And I just throw it away. And it's like, I maybe follow him on social media, but that's not real networking, right? Real networking is what you're doing and other people are doing with these smaller events, where it's 2.5 days of, can't escape this person. I've got to get to know them and what they're doing. And we're going to have drinks, or we're going to loosen up a little bit. I'm going to get to know about his family. Like, where is he from? Networking is beyond, what are you doing in real estate and how can I help you? Right. I want to walk away from that event going, man, that guy, I'd go have a beer with that guy. Or, hey, I can help that guy do this. Or next time I'm in Vegas and I'm going to hit up Branton because we're going to go grab a drink together. Yeah. And that's the relationships that end up making deals together. And so what did you learn? I know you just said you're hosting another one in October. What did you learn from the first one hosting it? What are you going to do different on the second one?
I think the event itself was great. We sent out a post-event survey. We got really good feedback on both the presenters. We had a friend of ours come in from Black Bear Capital that places all of our debt for our deals. He came in and talked about different debt products and how they work. We had our SEC attorney come in and talk about the basics of deal structure. We kept it very low level. And then we had, I spoke, but it was more as a moderator. And we had our friend Charlie with Sabre Equity talk about, some motel conversions to multifamily that he's doing, which is kind of a specific niche in Florida. And so it was, again, keeping the conversations going, and then really deliberately stopping and asking questions and allowing tangents to occur from a discussion standpoint, because that's where the golden nuggets, I think, end up being. And it spurs thought, gets those creative juices flowing in everyone's mind.
Yeah.
So we'll retain the overall structure. Liked it a lot. I think from a business perspective, it was the first time we'd ever hosted an event. So I think we blew it. We undershot on how to market, effective use of social media versus relying too heavily on social media, things like that. So just having a clean process for people to see it. And it was our first one. So we were
kind of like dialing back to your first deal you ever did, right?
Oh my gosh. It's exactly like the first deal. Like, you don't know what you don't know. And you're like, I'll throw a Facebook post out there with a bunch of emojis. And then you're like, wait a minute, if I'm not friends with them on Facebook, they can't see the post. And so now I have to befriend them and tag them. And it's like, if there's such a thing as a funnel, that is not it. So, so we're cleaning that up a little bit so that it's a little easier for people to see and understand just from an online marketing perspective. It's an event that you want people to attend. You are selling a product of sorts. It's not really for profit, but and making sure people understand why it's exclusive in its size. Mm-hmm. And this next one's going to be really neat as well, because we have some neat people that are already in town that are going to come speak to us. So it should be really fun.
And what's the date of that next one? Put a little
It'll
plug.
Be October 13 through 15. So it'll be a Thursday evening first event that allows people to travel that day and come into town, get checked in, and then have a cocktail mixer, meet and greet that evening.
Yeah.
And then Friday we'll be all attending Jonathan Twombly and Omar Khan's event that day that's going on elsewhere in town. So we're friends with them. So we're going over to their finale event Friday for a half day. And then we're going to do a fun activity with just our group in the afternoon, great dinner together. And then Saturday morning, the first half of the day, our roundtable discussion with our group. Jonathan Twombly and Omar Khan are going to come over and sit down with us for a couple hours and just really just kind of have a casual conversation about capital raising and Omar Khan is a phenomenal asset manager, which is a part of the business that nobody talks about. What to do once you buy the property.
That's the part of the business that not many people want to do.
Nobody wants to do it. And I mean, arguably the acquisition is 60, 90 days.
Yeah.
And that's where 99% of everybody's effort is spent. And then it's 5-6 years of work to hit those returns that you sold to investors. Right.
Yes.
So, and nobody talks about it. There's no checklist for that. There's no processes for that. So you either ad hoc it yourself and figure it out the hard way, or, you go hire some asset management firm you don't even know how to vet. So,
that's what we went through. You hire the property management firm, right? They're like, okay, this property manager, they know what they're doing.
Right.
And it's like, okay, well, who wants to be married to this for 5 years? And no one's hand goes up. And so you just have to assign somebody and be like, hey, you got to go learn how to do this. I know for me, it's so time consuming, right? It's another thing to put on your calendar each week. Is it important? Oh yeah. You're damn right it's important. Like it's one. Right. If outside of property management, that's the next position that's so important to hit those returns. But it's very, very time consuming, and it's such a long period of time. And the reward doesn't come till the end.
Oh my gosh, you're getting paid
if you perform.
Nothing. You're getting paid nothing. And I think that there was some of the paradigm shifts, not paradigm shifts, that was in the beginning. More of the big lessons learned. You and I discussed this. You and I and Ramsey discussed this at the event back in May here in Vegas that we were all at. Is that realization when you get into the business that unless you stay at a small property size, you are not going to be the majority owner of your own deal.
Right.
That is a big expectation that you come into the business. You're just like, well, wait a minute. If I only own 15% of the deal, how am I going to make any money? And you're like, welcome to real estate syndication. Oh, and by the way, you eat last. The leaders eat last, right? Yeah. The general partners, you get some, an acquisition fee that you're going to split up 19 different ways or whatever. And then the asset management fee is really just paying for people's flights to get there and do the basic, the taxes and stuff. Really short of capital. And even people are like, oh no, deals that cash flow from day one, everybody's making money. And you're like, no, that's all going to your investors.
Yes.
They get paid first because they put up the money. So even on a good syndication deal, if you're refining it midway through, really operational cash flow doesn't start flowing even in a small level to the general partners until like year 2 or 3. So I would say 90% of the compensation for the general partners comes at the point of sale.
Yeah.
And that was something that no one had talked about. No one had told me. And I mean, I guess it makes sense, right? If you're trying to sell a coaching program and you're like, come on in, work tirelessly on a deal for 5 years and don't get paid till the last day, not a lot of people would sign up, right?
Right.
But I think the long-term payoff though, and that's where the real estate is a long-term game. There's a lot of wealth to be had in it. but there's the velocity of money. You need to stack your pipeline, and the only thing you have to give away to get those first couple of years of deals done is equity. So if you need someone to bring money, you give them equity in the deal. If you need capital raising, you give equity in the deal, loan signatures, all that kind of stuff, asset managers. As a result, you come away owning 10% of your own deal. And by the way, you're in charge, right? You're the captain of the ship. So you have to get through that phase. And I jokingly say in this business, you have to get your first 300 or 400 doors just so that the next 300 to 400 you can make money on.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Because it's those next ones where you can solve more of the pieces on your own in-house, meaning that you can retain more ownership of your deal so that when it does dispo, whether refi or sale, you're getting 25 or 35% of the proceeds.
Yeah.
But if you stack that pipeline and you're just tenacious and you stick with it and you keep putting two deals a year in your pipeline and you keep that cycle going and they start to sell every 5-6 years, when you do hit that 8 or 9 year point, it seems like a long time. It goes by fast when you're looking back though. When they start to sell and you're getting bigger chunks of money, you're like, oh, now I see.
Yes.
Because 30% of $1 million event is a big chunk of money. So, but that's residual, right? It's definitely not passive, and it's very active. But you are getting paid for something that you put into the pipeline 5 years prior.
Yeah, and what we do with our group, we're all full time. We got Ramsey and Joey full time military. I'm a full time business owner, full time family, just like you. We are doing syndications as well, Branton, but we're also along the way picking up small joint ventures between the three of us, right? We'll go buy a 10 or 12 unit with three of us where we all own, 33 1/3% equity in that deal. Yeah. And that sucker is going to cash flow $1,000 a month, which is great because you just take that cash and you turn it over into the next syndication. So we're kind of playing both sides of the fence. I know a lot of groups only do syndications and they're playing that long-term game. But we realized early that, that we're not going to get paid on that syndication for 5 years, but we need to do it to create credibility, to build wealth, to keep the train moving forward. We can go capital raise for deals. That's kind of our way in right now because of the time clock we have. But those small joint ventures, I think, don't ignore those.
Absolutely.
They're cash flowing.
You and I had this conversation. You and I had this conversation. I mean, if you get to, everyone's always very forward looking, scale up, scale up, scale up. That's the conversation of every podcast and book, right? Bigger is better. And to some extent, that's true. You get more access to better money. More people want to invest in bigger deals. You can get better management companies. You can get better debt. But that said, it's a different competition. Different level of competition, and so and also you're perpetuating the same cycle, which is it is good to strive and to scale up. But if you're constantly moving up to the next level, you're going to kind of still not be able to solve for all those pieces. So you're giving away all the equity, and it's that cycle. So that's okay. But you get to a place where you have 2 or 3 or 400 doors. You can also say, okay, we're going to continue with that scaling up, but we're also going to turn around and, like you guys did, and say, we need some cash flow in the short term. And for the same reason that we have to give away 80% of the deal to get this 200 unit done, I can turn around and own 80% of this 40 unit. Correct. Because now I'm the big fish in that little pond.
Right.
And now you have the track record to get great debt, to capital raise on a smaller amount, to find the deal, source the deal, to get, you have credibility with the brokers if it's a marketed deal. And across the board, you're now, these guys have 300-400. Oh, by the way, you're going to be a very highly qualified buyer. If you've got 300 or 400 doors and you're going after this 40 unit or 50 unit, there's a good chance the seller is going to look at you and say, oh no, this guy's very qualified. He's going to close the deal.
They see the door count and the amount of money of assets under management. That's an immediate credibility, right? I got 400 doors and I've got 20 million in assets under management. They don't care. Oh, they're not going to ask, what percentage do you own of that? Right. They don't ask that question. It's just a credibility piece. It helps with lenders, correct, property managers, with owners, etc. So,
and I think there's a piece in there too with operators. One little note on that. it is a constant struggle to get credibility in the game, to get your foot in the game. And you can do that 100 different ways. Like you said, if you guys can capital raise for a deal, you can snag some equity. I think it's very important for people, though, to remember that at some point you need to run your own deals, whether it's a 16 unit or a 1600 unit. You need to run the deal because you only learn certain things. If you only own 5, or it's not really about the percentage of ownership. It's more about your assignment and of duties and responsibilities. But if you have not been the fiduciary to those investors with their money and driving that net operating income and making the day-to-day decisions and the struggles with the property manager and with tenants and with CapEx plans and budgets, there are things you just won't know. Mm-hmm. So while part of it is a fake it till you make it and get some doors under management, even if it's 1%, just check the boxes with lenders. That's okay. Everyone does it. But I know people in the business that have gotten to 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 doors that way. And then they turn around and they want to start taking down really big deals respective to their doors under management. And it became abundantly clear very quickly that they had never run their own deal because they couldn't hold the conversations. Everyone's looking going, you should know this at this point. Yeah. So a word to the wise of people getting started or wherever you are in your journey. And we don't mean, you have to take down your own deal and do it alone, but you can be co-GP with another team or two and split up asset management and who's doing the draws with the bank and things like that. You learn the ins and outs and the nuts and bolts that you need to know if you're going to be effective in this business.
Yeah. And even if there isn't a seat on that asset management table for you, just volunteer to be a fly on the wall, right?
Yeah.
Hey guys, I'm going to listen in on the asset management calls. I just want to hear what's going on. I want to hear the lingo, I want to hear the problems you're having. You're not going to get a paid dime for it, but that's just invaluable experience that you're listening to experts take on. So leads me into my kind of one of our final questions here. I guess you maybe just said it. Maybe you can switch the subject of, what bruises your bananas inside of real estate, Branton? Like what's one thing that just drives you nuts that some of these other operators are doing?
Yeah, I mean, internal to our business, you have to be very self-aware. I think as any successful leader, business owner of any type, you have to be very self-aware. And we've realized that coming from our background in military and law enforcement and when you build the business, we didn't have a big network of high net worth individuals. So capital raising is our Achilles heel. And so we rely on others, and it's a team sport. And that's really where we bring people in collectively to get that done. So that's the thing. But outward looking, outside of our business, I think people that are wheeling and dealing deals that only want to dip their toe in the water, they kind of take full responsibility. They take full credit, not responsibility. They take full credit for doors under management or things like that. And they're out there saying, oh, we only do these size deals. And they're dropping their video on Instagram of doing all this due diligence. But you have to really remember that that is a mile wide and an eighth of an inch deep. Mm-hmm. And it's really easy to get caught up on social media, which is platforms that we all need to use in this business. Whether you love it or if you look at it like I do, which is a necessary evil. You have to remember that 99% of those deals and due diligence that they're doing probably aren't closing. They probably don't own them. And they may just be a straggler that shows up that's raising a couple $100,000 for someone else's deal, and they have no responsibility whatsoever and none of the requisite knowledge. So it's really easy to get sucked into that online image that everyone else is just slaying it in the business. And you get really frustrated and you can get a little depressed about why am I not seeing deals? Why am I not doing this and that? So I think that is where teaming up with people and partners and kind of tuning that out. You have to tune that out. Yeah. See it, do it, learn from it, extract the good, leave the bad, and then turn around and go back to work with your partners and say, let's go get deals done.
That's phenomenal.
And I think that's the biggest thing.
Yeah. That's all great, man. It's smoke and mirrors on the internet, man. It really is. You're right. There's guys, I just submitted an LOI on this, and it's basically they're trying to build their credibility, probably to raise capital.
Right.
And if you're
I don't fault them for it.
Yeah. And if you're a passive investor out there, make sure you look past who the capital raiser is and who's actually operating the deal. Right. That's so important. I may be raising capital for Branton's deal as an investor that I'm asking for $50,000 for that deal. They need to know that I'm not the asset manager and operator. Branton is, and they need to go past me and figure out who the hell is Branton and has he done this before?
Right.
Because the money that they're investing is really laying on the business plan and execution of the business plan.
Yep. And it's tied to that other person's decision-making process.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
That's awesome, man. Okay. Where can people find you, connect with you, plug your event, plug your website, whatever you want, buddy?
Absolutely. Well, the easiest way to get a hold of me is by email, Branton, and we can drop it in the show notes, branton@thebearinggroup.com. And we have a website that's getting overhauled and redeveloped, and so will be launching here in the next few weeks. But we started the Bearing Group. It's kind of a double meaning name. We, being military and backgrounds, there's that military bearing thing, and then there's, with operating with integrity and everything else. But then also it was that you're bearing in the use of your direction. We are at a point where the business, where we understand where we've been, where we want to go. So that's how we came up with the name. And it's kind of a rebrand and relaunch. So reach out to me by email. I'm on Facebook and Instagram as well. I can't promise that I'll get back to you in a day on the various direct messaging, because I slack on that. And I get so much stuff for people that want to just do random things. But yeah, reach out. We love talking to people. We love working with new people. If you're new, find a way to plug in and we'll plug you in. We love that. Finding deals in your local market, helping underwrite, whatever it may be, boots on ground. And that's things that take a little bit of knowledge and just a lot of effort. So we love working with people. And if we can help you take down your first deal or your fifth deal, great. We would love to do that.
Awesome, buddy. Good catching up. Thanks for being on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. See ya.
Thanks for listening to the Gorilla State Investing Podcast, where we give you the ground-pounding truth about what it takes to be successful in real estate. Learn more at realfocus.org/Gorilla State Pod.